150. Now that is the rough number of different negotiation points inside of a real estate deal. And when I say real estate deal, I mean when a buyer writes an offer to a seller, there is 150 or more different negotiation points inside of a deal. And the reason that I mention that, all buyers want to get the best deal possible. But when doing that, they really only focus on one term, which is price. Now, believe it or not, this is one of the worst ways to negotiate your real estate deal. And before I get into the rest of this video, I want to make sure I introduce myself. My name is Christian Stubbs. I'm a team leader and owner here of Onyx Homes. You can check us out at onyxhomes.com. I make videos like this all the time to give you, the consumer, as much information as possible so you can negotiate a better real estate deal and make a better decision hiring your next agent. So let's dive in. And this is going to be a video talking about the comparison of two different offers. And I'm going to ask you, which one would you choose? And at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about the different strategies that we use in order to save our clients a ton of money when we're representing them as buyers through the purchase. So first, let's talk about what sellers actually want. And most people think that sellers want just to sell their house for as much money as possible. And I can tell you, as a real estate agent, that is true some of the time, but not most. The thing that sellers want more often than not is certainty. That is something that every single seller wants. Maybe 99% of sellers want certainty inside of their real estate deal. And yes, most people do want to sell their home for as much as possible, but a lot of them are not willing to budge on the level of certainty that they have that the deal's actually going to go through. Now, we use this to negotiate better deals for our buyers all day long, but as I mentioned earlier, there are 150 different negotiation points in a real estate deal. Now, for the sake of this video, and most of the time when you're talking about a real estate deal, there's 6 major points that we're going to talk about. Number 1 is price. Number 2 is closing costs, meaning who pays for what. Number 3 is inspections and your due diligence, your disclosures. Number 4 is the appraisal contingency. Number 5 is the loan contingency. And number 6, last but not least, is the close of escrow. This is the timeline of the deal. So those are the 6 terms. It's the price that you're offering, the closing cost, who pays for what. It is the inspection and disclosure contingency, appraisal contingency, loan contingency, close of escrow. Those are the 6 most common terms that are negotiated inside of a deal. Obviously, all the terms are negotiated in every deal, but for the sake of this one, we're just going to compare these 6. Now, here's a quick side note for you, and this is something we talk about later, but the side note is my and my team's goal here at Onyx Homes. Our goal is to make your offer look as good as possible everywhere except for the purchase price. So we leverage all of these other terms in order to make your offer look better. And I'm gonna demonstrate this visually. So I'm gonna put 2 different offers here on the screen. We're gonna walk through one at a time. And then I'm gonna ask you to choose, as if you were the seller, which one would you pick? And to make easy round numbers, let's say that you are listing your property for $1 million. And these are the 2 different offers that you receive on the house. All right, offer number 1, and we're using these same 6 negotiation points. So price is $1 million. So they are offering the listed price of $1 million. Number 2, for closing costs, they are going for the typical structure, which means it's this buyer and seller each paying for what they normally would pay for. For ease, I won't go more into detail than that. Number 3 is the inspection disclosure contingency. This is the due diligence of the buyer. That is a 17-day period. The appraisal and loan contingencies are also a 17-day period, and close of escrow is a 30-day period. Now, the summary for offer number 1 is it is a list price offer with standard contract terms, meaning that 17 days is the number of days that is written into the contract as standard, and a 30-day escrow is pretty normal given most escrows are around 30 days. Now, that's offer number 1. Let's move over here to offer number 2, and we'll put them side by side on the screen so you can see the difference. Offer number 2, number 1 is price is going to be $990,000, so it's $10,000 less on price. Line item 2 is closing costs. So this offer is asking for $5,000 in closing cost credits to the buyer, meaning the seller is going to credit the buyer an additional $5,000. 3, the inspection and due diligence contingency is going to be 5 days after acceptance. And the appraisal and loan contingency have been completely waived. No appraisal, no loan contingency. Close of escrow is in 14 days. Now, one other important thing to mention with this offer is that the lender that this offer chose to go with, or this buyer chose to go with, is somebody who will write in a $500 a day per diem to the seller if that lender is late on closing. So yes, There is no loan contingency, there's no appraisal contingency, and it's a finance deal. So here's the summary for offer number 2. This is a financed buyer with a lender guarantee that they're gonna close on time, and they will pay $500 every day they're late to the seller if they are late. They are offering a little bit lower than list price from $1 million to $990, and they're asking for $5,000 for seller concessions, or the seller crediting the buyer's closing cost. All right, now you are the seller. Which of these two offers are you going to take? Now, if we came into this with the frame that sellers want the highest offer with the highest price, and that's the only thing that matters, offer number 1 is the obvious choice. Well, if we take into the consideration that most sellers want some level of certainty that the deal's actually gonna close, offer number 2 starts to look a little bit better. So let's walk through each of them. Offer number 1 gives you exactly what you asked for. They gave you $1 million, and they are gonna take 17 days to find out, 1, if they're comfortable with their due diligence on the property, meaning they're gonna do inspections, they're gonna read your disclosures. It's gonna take them 17 days to tell you if they are comfortable with that before they even ask you for a repair request. Number 2 is the appraisal is also gonna take 17 days. So the lender is gonna send out an appraiser, and it's gonna take 2.5 weeks for you to find out if they're gonna have to renegotiate on price. Number 3 is they're gonna have to go and have a loan contingency. So this buyer is not fully underwritten for the loan, and the lender needs 2.5 weeks to find out if they're comfortable moving forward. And then you as the seller, if everything moves forward, you get your money in 30 days. Now that is the structure of offer number 1. That is the reality for you. If I'm talking to you as your agent explaining this offer, that's how this works. So if you accept the offer today, we will not even know if the buyer is willing to move forward, approved for the loan, or approved for the loan at this price for 2.5 weeks, and then you would get your money 30 days after. So that is offer number 1. Now let's move over to offer number 2 and explain this. So offer number 2 is 1% lower than the list price, and they're asking for another 0.5% in closing cost credit. So it's a 1.5% lower than list price offer. It's $10,000 off the price and $5,000 additional in closing cost credits. So it's a lower cash to the seller. Now, on the flip side is this buyer only needs 5 days to go through all of their inspections and due diligence to feel comfortable moving forward with the sale. They do not need an appraisal contingency. They do not need a loan contingency for 2 reasons. 1, their loan is fully underwritten, so they do not have to worry about a loan contingency in the first place. Not to mention the lender's also backing it with a $500 a day per diem if they were late. And number 2 is the buyer is willing to waive or pay any difference on the appraisal amount. So if the property appraised for less, the buyer is not only not backing out, but they're also not gonna ask you as the seller to pay for that difference. And last but not least, you're gonna know in 5 days if you're gonna close this deal, and you're gonna get your money in 14. So with offer number 2 over here, you are gonna know in 5 days if you're moving forward and 14 days if you close, meaning you would close this deal for $15,000 less before you would even find out if this buyer over here, offer number 1, is even willing to move forward. Or if they would start renegotiating, it would be after the time frame you would have already closed this deal. Now you as the seller, what do you want to do? Which one of these offers do you want to take? Now let's add more to this conversation, because in the reality, there's a lot of other moving pieces that are going around. For $15,000, the certainty of this buyer closing is way, way, way stronger. So I can tell you from experience, probably 90% of sellers in this situation, you can tell me in the comments below if you felt differently, would pick offer number 2 that has a way higher level of certainty for just a $15,000 difference. Now here's a pro tip for you. This was a $15,000 difference on $1 million price. What if it was a $25,000 difference? If you selected offer number 2 at a $15,000 difference, would you pick it again at a 20 or a 25 or a $50,000 difference? And the reality is, if that sounds like if you're a buyer or if you're in a seller's position, this happens all the time. Last year, our team, Onyx Homes, negotiated a total of $1.26, yes, $1,260,000 off of the listed price of the properties that we represented buyers on. 70% of all of our clients negotiated a deal below asking price in a year where the average was asking price. So 70% of our clients, meaning 20% more than the average, got below list price. And those that did pay above list price, we were able to make sure they weren't always just paying the most money. That is the pro tip, is that as a buyer, you can save yourself so much money by negotiating terms other than price. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this, and there's so many things that have to happen in order for you, a client, to feel comfortable and confident doing these things. So here's the reality, is We have this happen all the time. I'll give you two examples. I'll give you one example of us representing a buyer and one example of us representing a seller where this happened. So example number one, this is case study number one, is we represented a buyer that went through our buyer strategy session, which is where we talk about all of the tricks and tips and strategies in order to take advantage of the market, keep you protected, and get you the best deal possible. And this client took our advice. They wrote an offer that was $75,000 less than the highest offer. So in this example, they were offer number two, better terms, lower price, $75,000 less. And if you're asking what the price of this property was, it was about 1.4. So this wasn't a multi-million dollar property where 75,000 is not that big of a deal. It's a big deal. It was a huge percentage of the price. So we wrote an offer for $75,000 less than the highest price and got our offer accepted. Not only did we do that, the property appraised for higher than we purchased the property for. So our client came out way ahead in this deal and saved at least $75,000. If the advice would have been to just pay the most for the house, it would have cost them a lot of money. That's case study number one, saved our buyer a ton of money. Now let's go over to case study number two. This is when we were representing a seller and we listed a property for sale at a record-breaking price in the neighborhood. It was one of the nicest properties in the neighborhood, a great lot, great upgrades, but we were selling it at a huge premium and we knew that. We prepped our sellers going into it. We were able to drive multiple offers to this property because of the marketing, because of how many eyeballs got on it. And the reality was we got multiple offers, but it really came down to two buyers. One was a cash buyer that was paying significantly more than the finance buyer, but the finance buyer had way better terms. Again, similar to this option 1 and 2 we talked about earlier. The cash buyer was about $60,000 higher in price, but the seller had a very low level of certainty that they were, one, not going to renegotiate, and two, that they were actually going to close the deal, at least at those terms. So the seller opted to go with offer number two, which is a buyer that closed on their terms, on their timelines, and it was a very clean and easy deal for the seller because they went with certainty versus that higher price. Now that buyer that had better terms, if they would have just paid the most money, they would have cost themselves at least $60,000 or $70,000, but because they came in with a good plan, good agent, and good terms, they were able to get the house for a much better deal. So there's two different case studies. One, our advice to our seller was to take the lower price with the higher level of certainty because of what they wanted to do. We felt like if this buyer backed out at the higher price, we would not be able to get them that number again. So they went with the lower price, which was still a record-breaking sale by a mile in that neighborhood. And they were very happy with the price, very happy with the deal, and that other buyer may or may not have actually closed on that deal. Now, if all this sounds interesting to you, but you're wondering, Christian, like tactically, what exactly do we do? Very simple. We do a buyer strategy session with any client who is thinking about making a move. Really, if you're thinking about making a move in the next year, I would highly recommend scheduling one of these. So there's a couple different ways to do it. You can go to becomeabetterbuyer.com or you can go over to our website, onyxhomes.com, click the buy button and set up your buyer strategy session. I hope you found this valuable. As always, my name is Christian and I'll see you in the next video.